think that's
All right. Well, we're live right here on Faith Chats, where the topic is always about faith, family, freedom, and America. And today, my guest, I am honored to have the president of NRB, Troy Miller, here. I recently joined as a member, and I'm going to tell you, NRB is the best thing that has happened to me.
well. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me, and thanks for being a member. And welcome aboard.
I am so excited to be able to attend. I guess we'll start the conversation off this way. I'm excited to be able to attend the upcoming convention in February. Share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our annual conference will be February 17th through the 20th in Nashville, Tennessee, at the Gaylord Opryland Hotel, which is almost like a city on itself. We're expecting nearly 7,000 people to be in attendance. Our exhibit floor will be over 60,000 square feet, I think. We'll have probably somewhere around 260 plus exhibitors. And of course, we'll have a number of sessions that will cover all the top cultural topics, technical topics, innovation things, fundraising, you name it, we'll be talking about it.
That's great. So you have a diverse background, including service in the U.S. Navy and roles in IT and media management before ever joining NRB. How has your military experience influenced your approach to leading a faith-based organization like NRB?
Well, that's a great question because it's a pretty big jump from the U.S. Navy into Christian media. But look, I think the thing about the Navy that really helped me is you really understand teamwork, you understand how to work together and how different units and different people depend on each other. And of course, NRB, that's all of those things. So all of those things sort of come together, and that experience really helps me relate to all these different organizations and how to help them all coordinate.
So, being raised in a Catholic family, but later embracing an evangelical faith, what pivotal moments in your spiritual journey shaped your commitment to Christian communications?
Well, look, a couple of things all the way back from the beginning. My grandmother was a continuous, constant, huge consumer of Christian media. She watched every day Christian television, Christian radio. She wrote for the resources, and that's what really was instrumental in bringing me to Christ. Was my grandmother sending me a copy of a free resource she wrote from Core Ridge Ministries, D. James Kennedy's television program, and she sent me that book, Why I Believe. It was the first apologetic on Christianity I'd ever read. From that point on, really, my wife and I, both of us, became avid listeners of Christian radio, followers of Christian ministries. And of course, as the digital age came, we consumed podcast, and that really, influenced me on the power of communications and the power of reaching people through mass media.
So, since becoming president and CEO of NRB in 2022 and continuing as president and CEO of NRB TV since 2005, what has been the most rewarding aspect of bridging traditional broadcasting with emerging digital platforms?
Oh, I think one of the most rewarding things, look, we recently completed a survey with the Barna group on, the effectiveness and the impact of Christian media. And I think just seeing how deep Christian media reaches into our culture is the most rewarding, to know that we're helping these communicators and we're instrumental in keeping them in that cultural marketplace and keeping them on the air. That's the thing that's, I think, for me, Andrew, is the most impactful, knowing that we're being effective in keeping Christian communicators like yourself being able to podcast or broadcast in today's world.
So, NRB represents a wide spectrum of Christian communicators. How do you foster unity and collaboration among members with diverse theological and stylistic approaches?
Look, I think the main thing for us is keeping us all focused on what the big mission is. That our overall mission of evangelism, of getting the gospel to a lost nation, a lost culture around the world, and discipling people. I think as we pull people back into those two big umbrella issues, that's what really creates the unity. You know, the Apostle Paul told us in Corinthians that the church is like a body, you know, and the hands need the feet and the legs need the arms, and we're all connected and we all have God's purpose. Even though we might have unique doctrines, unique beliefs, it's the core doctrines and the core part of who we are as the bride of Christ that unifies us. And that's one of the things we try to focus on.
So, in recent discussions, you've highlighted challenges like potential censorship and regulatory pressures on Christian media. What specific threats do you see as most pressing for religious broadcasters such as myself today, and how is NRB responding?
Look, I still think that, you know, look, I want to give a couple of good shout outs here. I think we have a great administration right now. We've seen a lot of the reversal of the weaponization of government against Christian communicators and against Christians in general. You know, we don't have the FBI knocking on the doors of our Catholic, brothers and sisters who are pro-life anymore. We don't find Christians ending up on lists within the government. So we've seen a lot of change within the government. We still have a lot of work on corporate America to do. Corporate America is still very hostile toward the Christian message, especially the social media and the as we call them, the internet edge providers. So there's a lot of work to do there to make sure we're maintaining that. But look, we're in a good place now. It's a good place for Christian communicators, and we need to capitalize on that.
So, as a leading voice on the AM for Every Vehicle Act, what role do you believe that AM radio plays in preserving access to faith based content? And why is this legislation critical now?
I think it's so critical now because we live in an age where we're seeing more and more gatekeepers out there. We just talked about the weaponization of these gatekeepers against the Christian message. I don't think we need another gatekeeper called the automobile manufacturers who don't want to put access to free content into the vehicles. And this isn't about, Andrew, the AM radio is not about, car interference or old technology. This is about who's going to control the information in the vehicle and who's going to profit from that data that consumers have. Think about it for a second, Andrew. If they know can capitalize on your GPS data back through the internet, and they know you're trucking down the road and you're going to come up on, XYZ coffee shop or XYZ bagel shop or whatever, and all of a sudden on that nice big screen, you've got a 1/3 message that says, hey, a fresh brew of coffee, just a block away. That's the kind of capitalization on the information in the car that they want. So we look at this as an access issue for the consumer to be able to make their own free choices. We look at it as a privacy issue for the consumers to be able to opt in or opt out of having that kind of information there. And then again, we look at it as not putting another gatekeeper in there that could decide one day they just don't like any kind of Christian conservative broadcasting or messaging and just shut it off altogether.
So, in commemorating figures like our friend Charlie Kirk, who was just assassinated, how does the NRB honor the legacy of influential Christian communicators who have shaped the field?
Look, there's a lot of them out there. We lost John MacArthur this year, one of the premier pastors and theologians of our time. We've lost James Dobson, who was one of the family, shaped, I think, the family through the 80s and 90s and in the early 2000s. And of course, the assassination, the murder of Charlie Kirk, one of the leading voices to the youth of this country, to the next generation of leaders and the next generation of Christians out there. And Charlie's, legacy out there, I think, is really about being a Christian communicator. Charlie was all about communications. That was his whole persona. He would get out and talk to people, get out there and hold these conversations. They really weren't debates. They were much more open conversations. And I think as Christian communicators, we really need to honor that legacy by carrying the torch. I think somebody said it, I didn't coin the phrase, but I heard it said that, God calls the messengers home, but the message must go on. And as Christian communicators, our job is to carry the message on.
That's great. So continuing on, your recent recognition as one of Israel's top 50 Christian allies underscores NRB's strong support for Israel. How has Christian unity and support of Israel evolved in the past year, particularly amid global propaganda efforts?
Well, look, there are a lot of global propaganda efforts, and I think Christians have been really stepped up to be the communicators on anti-Semitism and the right for Israel to exist as a country in the Middle East. That's two things that I think if it wasn't for the Christian support and Christian pressure here in the U.S. and an understanding that you might have seen a lot of different outcomes. Look, we saw Europe, vote for a Palestinian state in territory which God, is territory God promised and gave to the Jewish people. We saw the UN's recent votes as well, and I think again it's the Christian voice that has been solid in support of Israel's rights to exist and solid in the fight against anti-Semitism. I'm of the belief, Andrew, that if Israel falls and is behind it, the church is going to be right behind that, because whether or not Israel are believers in Christ or not, Paul still called them the root. And our goal is that they would be believers and would come grafted in. And it certainly isn't going to happen if we let it fall.
So with the rise of podcast as one of the fastest growing spiritual genres in 2025, how is NRB equipping members to leverage this medium for evangelism and discipleship?
Look, I think one of the things I say all the time is Christian communicators are often the innovators and first adapters of a lot of things, out there. They were into, turning their radio programs into MP3s and now into podcast. And now we're seeing the next generation of people like you, Andrew, who are launching podcasts. Who are out there, look at this saying, look, I can do this from my home. I can do this with a lower budget. I don't have to have the hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars it used to take to get into, Christian broadcasting and Christian communication. And so we build that. We have a number of sessions on podcasting at the convention. We have different groups that we work with and support to help podcasters and get them promoted out there. So podcasting is not, I won't say it's only the future, because it's really going both ways. We're seeing podcasters today who built up great podcast audience, but they're heading into radio and traditional communication to even expand their audiences more. So it's a real, I think it's a real collaboration between new media and traditional media that's only going to be, at the end of the day, is only going to make the gospel more effective.
So partnerships like Lightcast for multi-platform streaming are powering digital ministry. What advice do you have for smaller ministries adopting these technologies?
Look, first of all, hey, come see us at the NRB convention, because you're going to get a lot of iron sharpening iron there. You're going to learn a lot about your trade. You're also going to be able to make a lot of networking connections with people. But look, keep going at it. Don't give up. People don't know that a lot of the major shows that are syndicated, let's just say in commercial networks today, they started as very small ventures, very small audiences. businesses and have grown to what they are. So don't be discouraged. There's a huge audience out there that wants to hear from you. That's part of the study we just talked about in our own webinar this morning. 60% of the American population is tuning in to Christian media in some form. And so there's a huge hunger out there. Keep at it.
So the Barna study highlights a revival of faith among the next generation. How can Christian media producers better engage Gen Z and Alpha through innovative formats?
Well, look, get to where Gen Z and Alpha is. I think that's the biggest innovation. Get on TikTok, get on um, the other platforms where they're hanging out, where they are. That's the first thing you need to do is go where they're at. The second thing you need to do, and this is something we can really learn from Charlie Kirk's TPUSA ministry. Listen to them. Listen to what they're saying. Listen to the feedback. Listen to the questions that they're asking, and then be prepared to answer those questions to them, and be prepared to be honest, even in the times where it might be uncomfortable to be honest. Be honest with them. This is a generation that wants to hear honesty, and the trust factor is huge for them.
So, as streaming continues to dominate, what ethical considerations should Christian communicators prioritize when using AI tools for content generation and personalization?
Yeah, I think AI, we have a lot of ethical questions to answer there, but I think a couple of the things I think we have to be able to do is, first of all, I think we have to communicate to people when we're using AI that this information was generated by AI, or this content was generated by AI. We're going to have some ethics discussions this year at the NRB, talking about things like, is it ethical to reproduce virtual avatars of preachers from the past? Is it ethical to continue on with that? Is it ethical for us to use AI on other preachers' materials and claim it as our own? So I think there's a lot of issues there we have to discuss and think about. I always think about, Andrew, the line from Jurassic Park when they were doing all of this cloning and DNA, where he said, we were so in a hurry to prove that we could do it, we didn't stop to think whether we should. The one thing I think about Christians when you use AI, stop and think for a second, should I do this? And if I do, what are the effects going to be when people find out it was AI generated? It's sort of like growing up and finding out that, Santa Claus doesn't really exist and there's no such thing as the Easter Bunny. Is that going to undermine the messaging that I'm trying to get forward in the truth that's really behind the gospel and behind the scriptures?
So, in your recent TBN interview with Eric Stakelback, you discussed media trends. What's one under the radar technology NRB is exploring for 2026?
I think some of the new interactive technologies that are coming along in the broadcast area might be something that's sort of under the radar right now, of how we can interact in real time, not just you and I interacting like on this podcast, but how multiple people could interact in groups. I think group Bible study and discipleships and things like that are really going to be effective tools for us in technology in the future.
So, with the rise of AI, streaming, and social media algorithms, how do you envision the future of Christian storytelling and evangelism in the next decade?
Look, I don't think it's going to change much in the future. I think maybe the methods of how we delivered it and it's delivered and on the platform it's delivered might change, but the message is going to stay the same. Look, the scriptures have been solid for 2,000 plus years. The Old Testament goes back 3,000 years before that. So the messaging for us needs to stay the same. I think one of the things that challenges for us as Christians is to not look at these new tools and new methods and create gimmicks of how to do things or create marketing programs of how to do things. We just need to deliver the gospel message the way it's been delivered for 2,000 years and keep telling the story, the Christian story that we've been telling. Remember, one of the things the scriptures tell us, it's the power of our own testimony that's out there. We're just going to be more effective in who we can reach and how we can reach people. Let me talk about one more thing with AI there, because I think one thing that AI I'm really excited about is AI's ability to translate into other languages and into other cultures and help ministries really communicate and translate into those cultures. I think we set on a time when the gospel could be available in every language, whether it's spoken or written.
That's great. That's great. So NRB hosts major conventions and awards. Looking ahead to the 2026 event in Nashville, what emerging trends or innovations are you most excited about to showcase to members or keynote speakers?
Again, I think AI is going to be a top one. It's just the leading thing right now in innovation. So how do we, use AI effective as Christian communicators? How do we use some of the capabilities for Bible study tools? How can we use AI for apologetics? And then I think one of the things that we're going to talk about, Andrew, as Christians, how do we counter the negative use of AI? Because we know, look, from the dawn of man, from the fall in the garden, we know that every tool that's been out there has been used for good and it's been used for evil. We create a bow and arrow to learn how to hunt and get food for our families. And next thing you know, we're shooting each other with it. And so we have to be able, as Christians, to be able to respond to the evil use of these tools, as well as using and equipping our people for the positive use.
So, are there any exciting keynote speakers that you would like to highlight at this convention coming up?
Oh, I think we're going to have a few that we announce soon that were on that are right now on our pending, but we're going to have some great announcements soon. Look, we're going to do one of the things I think we're really excited about, Andrew, is on our Thursday night, we're going to do a big program that celebrates America's 250th, but we're focusing in on the Christian Judeo roots behind the founding of this country, because it's really those roots that are the bedrock of our democracy and our republic.
Well, Troy, thank you so much for your time. I'm excited to be an NRB member, and I encourage those Christian communicators and religious broadcasters to go to nrb.org and find out more information about the National Religious Broadcasters, because, hey, we need you to be a part as well. God bless you, Troy.
God bless you, Andrew, and thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. You be blessed.